Melakim 2, 2 Kings, chapter 3. And Joram, son of Achav, began to reign over Yisrael at Shamaron in the 18th year of Yehoshaphat, sovereign of Yehudah, and reigned 12 years. And he did evil in the eyes of Yahuah, but not like his father and mother, for he removed the statue of Baal which his father had made. But he clung to the sins of Yerovam, son of Nevat, who had made Yisrael sin. He did not turn away from them. And Mesha, sovereign of Moab, was a sheep breeder, and he paid the sovereign of Yisrael 100,000 lambs, and the wool of 100,000 rams. And it came to be when Achav died, that the sovereign of Moab revolted against the sovereign of Yisrael. And sovereign Joram went out of Shamaron at that time, and mustered all Yisrael. And he went and sent to Yehoshaphat, sovereign of Yehudah, saying, The sovereign of Moab has revolted against me. Do you go with me to fight against Moab? And he said, I go up. I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. And he said, Which way do we go up? And he said, By the way of the wilderness of Edom. And the sovereign of Yisrael went, and the sovereign of Yehudah, and the sovereign of Edom, and went round a journey of 7 days. And there was no water for the army, nor for the cattle that followed them. And the sovereign of Yisrael said, What? Has Yahuah called these 3 sovereigns to give them into the hand of Moab? And Yehoshaphat said, Is there no Navi of Yahuah here? Let us inquire of Yahuah through him. One of the servants of the sovereign of Israel then answered and said, Elisha, son of Shaphat, is here, who poured water out on the hands of Eliyahu. And Yehoshaphat said, The word of Yahuah is with him. And the sovereign of Israel and Yehoshaphat and the sovereign of Edom went down to him. And Elisha said to the sovereign of Israel, What have I to do with you? Go to the prophets of your father and the prophets of your mother. And the sovereign of Israel said to him, No, for Yahuah has called these 3 sovereigns to give them into the hand of Moab. And Elisha said, As Yahuah of hosts lives before whom I stand, if it were not that I regard the presence of Yehoshaphat, sovereign of Yehudah, I would not look at you nor see you. And now, bring me a harpist. And it came to be when the harpist played that the hand of Yahuah came upon him, and he said, Thus said Yahuah, Make this wadi ditches, for thus said Yahuah, You are not going to see wind nor rain, yet that wadi is to be filled with water, so that you, your cattle, and your beasts shall drink. And this shall be but a light matter in the eyes of Yahuah. And he shall give Moab into your hand, and you shall smite every walled city and every choice city, and shall cut down every good tree, and stop up every fountain of water, and ruin every good piece of land with stones. And it came to be in the morning, when the grain offering was offered, that see, water came by way of Edom, and the land was filled with water. And when all Moab heard that the sovereigns had come up to fight against them, all who were able to bear arms and older were gathered, and they stood at the border. And they rose up early in the morning, and the sun was shining on the water. And the Moabites saw the water on the other side as red as blood. And they said, This is blood. The sovereigns have indeed struck swords, and have killed one another. And now Moab to the spoil! And they came to the camp of Yisrael, and Yisrael rose up and smote the Moabites, so that they fled before them. And they entered their land and smote the Moabites. And they broke down the cities, and each man threw a stone on every good piece of land and filled it. And they stopped up all the fountains of water, and cut down all the good trees, until the stones of Ker Chereseth were left. And the slingers went round and smote it. And when the sovereign of Moab saw that the battle was too strong for him, he took with him 700 men who drew swords to break through to the sovereign of Edom, but they could not. Then took his eldest son, who would have reigned in his place, and offered him as a burnt offering upon the wall. and there was great wrath against Yisrael, and they left him and returned to the land. Melakim 2, 2 Kings chapter 4. And a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the Neviim cried out to Elisha, saying, Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant revered Yahuah, and the lender has come to take my 2 sons to be his slaves. And Elisha said to her, What should I do for you? Inform me, what do you have in the house? And she said, Your female servant has none at all in the house except a pot of oil. And he said, Go, borrow vessels from everywhere, from all your neighbors, empty vessels. Do not get a few. And when you have come in, you shall shut the door behind you and your sons. Then pour it into all those vessels and put aside the filled ones. So she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons, who brought to her, and she poured it out. And it came to be when the vessels were filled that she said to her son, Bring me another vessel. But he said to her, There is not another vessel. And the oil ceased. So she went and informed the man of Elohim, and he said, Go, sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons live on the rest. And it came to be on a day that Elisha went to Shunem, where there was a prominent woman, and she urged him to eat some food. And it came to be as often as he passed by that he turned in there to eat some food. And she said to her husband, Look, I know that this is a Kodesh man of Elohim who passes by us continually. Please, let us make a small upper room on the wall, and let us put a bed for him there, and a table and a chair and a lampstand. And it shall be whenever he comes to us, let him turn in there. And it came to be on a day that he came there, and he turned into the upper room and lay down there. And he said to Gehazi his servant, Call this Shunammite woman. So he called her, and she stood before him. And he said to him, Please say to her, Look, you have gone to all this trouble for us. What is there to be done for you? Should I speak on your behalf to the sovereign or to the commander of the army? And she answered, I am dwelling among my own people. And he said, What then is to be done for her? And Gehazi answered, Well, she has no son, and her husband is old. And he said, Call her. So he called her, and she stood in the doorway, and he said, About this time next year you shall embrace a son. And she said, No, my master, man of Elohim, do not lie to your female servant. And the woman conceived and bore a son when the appointed time had come, of which Elisha had spoken to her. And the child grew. And it came to be on a day that he went out to his father to the reapers. And he said to his father, My head, my head. And he said to a servant, Take him to his mother. So he took him and brought him to his mother, and he sat on her knees till noon and died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of Elohim, and shut him in, and went out. And she called to her husband and said, Please send me one of the young men and one of the donkeys, so that I hurry to the man of Elohim and return. And he said, Why are you going to him today? It is neither the new moon nor the Shabbat. And she said, It is well. And she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, Drive and go. Do not slow down, except I speak to you. And she went and came to the man of Elohim at Mount Carmel. And it came to be when the man of Elohim saw her at a distance, that he said to his servant Gehazi, See the Shunammite woman. Please run now to meet her, and say to her, Is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the child? And she answered, It is well. And she came to the man of Elohim at the hill, and she caught him by the feet. But Gehazi came near to push her away. But the man of Elohim said, Leave her alone, for her being is bitter in her, and Yahuah has hidden it from me, and has not revealed it to me. And she said, Did I ask a son of my master? Did I not say, do not deceive me? And he said to Gehazi, gird up your loins and take my staff in your hand and go. When you meet anyone, do not greet him, and when anyone greets you, do not answer him, and you shall lay my staff on the face of the child. And the mother of the child said, as Yahuah lives and as your being lives, I do not leave you. And he rose and followed her. And Gehazi went on ahead of them and laid the staff on the face of the child. But there was no voice, and there was no hearing. So he went back to meet him and reported to him, saying, the child has not awakened. And Elisha came into the house and saw the child was dead, lying on his bed. And he went in and shut the door behind the two of them and prayed to Yahuah. And he went up and lay on the child and put his mouth on his mouth and his eyes on his eyes and his hands on his hands and stretched himself out on the child. And the flesh of the child became warm. And he returned and walked back and forth in the house, then went up and stretched himself out on him. And the child sneezed 7 times. And the child opened his eyes, and he called Gehazi and said, call this Shunammite. So he called her, and she came into him, and he said, pick up your son. And she went in and fell at his feet and bowed herself to the ground and picked up her son and went out. And Elisha returned to Gilgal, and the scarcity of food was in the land, and the sons of the Neviim were sitting before him. And he said to his servant, put on the large pot and cook stew for the sons of the Neviim. And one went out to the field to gather plants and found a wild vine and gathered wild cucumbers from it, filling the skirt of his garment, and came and sliced them into the pot of stew, though they did not know what they were. They then served it to the men to eat, and it came to be as they were eating the stew that they cried out and said, O man of Elohim, there is death in the pot. And they were unable to eat it. And he said, then bring me some flour. And he put it into the pot and said, serve it to the people to eat. And there was no evil matter in the pot. Now a man came from Baal Shalishah and brought the man of Elohim bread of the first fruits, 20 loaves of barley bread and newly ripened grain in his knapsack. And he said, give it to the people to eat. And his servant said, what? Do I put this before 100 men? And he said, give it to the people to eat. For thus said Yahuah, eat and have some left over. And he put it before them, and they ate and had some left over, according to the word of Yahuah.